What's going on, class? Y'all's presentations have been amazing. I mean, really great work, honestly, I want to say. But it's my turn now. So listen up. Blood Meridian is a 2005 novel written by Cormac McCarthy, and a damn good one at that. The plot goes basically as follows. The book starts off with this monologue from our main character, Ed Tom Bell, about how the world has changed so much from his father's time this year. He's like, oh, it wasn't like this before, and now it's all crazy. And we cut to Anton Chigurh, our main antagonist, getting arrested, and then he kills the guy who arrested him, and then he takes off in his cop car and pulls over some other guy and then kills him so that he could take his car. And then we cut to our deuteragonist, or however you pronounce it, hunting some deer out in the woods, and he hits a deer and he's like, oh damn, I hit the deer but I didn't kill him, let me go check it out. And at the bottom of the hill that he's hunting up, he finds like this aftermath of a drug shootout, and he's like, oh my god, this is crazy. And then he goes up to some car and there's some guy that's still alive, and the guy's like, water, please give me water. And Moss is like, no, lol. And then he goes back up the hill and he goes to the last man standing, who died just recently, and he finds 2.4 million in a briefcase, and he takes it back and he goes back to his wife. And then we cut to Anton Chigurh, and this guy, he's having a conversation with this cashier, and basically he's like,
what's the most you ever lost on a coin toss? Sir? Call it.
The guy just walks out because he won the coin toss. He gets to live with his life. Later that night, Moss feels bad about leaving the guy, so he goes back to that area with a gallon of water, but he's dead. And wherever he parked his car up on the hill, there's a guy standing there, and he's like, oh shit, they're following me. And so he books it down the hill because they're in a truck, and so they just start shooting at him, and he barely makes it out alive. Later in the morning, he calls his wife on a payphone. He's like, hey, Carla Jean, we need to skip town. And she's like, oh, okay, why? She's like, I'm not telling you. She's like, okay. So she goes to Odessa County, and he goes to a hotel to hide out. Eventually, Sheriff Bell, our main protagonist, catches wind of this, and he goes out to check it out. He's like, damn, I really got to protect Moss and Carla Jean. Then it cuts to Moss skipping his hotel, and the next time Chigurh found him because of a receiver, but it was too late that Moss found out that there was a receiver in the briefcase, because Chigurh found him, and they both have a shootout, and they both barely make it out alive. They're both injured. Moss crosses the border to go to a hotel. Chigurh just patches himself up in a hotel with some supplies that he got at a pharmacy. Cut back to Moss in the hospital, and there's this guy, Carson Wells. He's like, hey, I used to work with Anton Chigurh. If you want to live, just give me the briefcase and I'll handle it. And if you don't, he's probably going to kill your wife. And that makes Moss think for a little bit. And then we cut to Carson Wells, in his hotel room. Chigurh found him. Oh my god, no. And then Moss calls, but as Moss called, Chigurh just pops him. And Chigurh picks up the phone, and he tells Moss, like, I'm going to kill your wife. And Moss is like, no, you're not. And so after that, he tells Carla Jean to relocate again to her mother's, and she gets worried, so she calls Sheriff Bell, and he's like, oh, I'm worried about Moss, and he is here at this hotel. But what she doesn't know is that she accidentally just doxed her husband, because Chigurh has the line tapped. Carla Jean and Sheriff Bell meet in person, and they talk about this situation. Then Bell's like, I gotta lock in. And so, he makes it his life priority to save Moss and his wife. Next time we see Moss, he's dead. It wasn't even Chigurh that killed him. It was just some other gang members that were looking for the $2.4 million. After that, Chigurh just pulls up to the crime scene after all the cops are gone. He gets the briefcase and just drops it off to his superior. And then Bell informs Carla Jean. And then after that, Carla Jean's mom dies, so she goes to her mom's funeral. But then Chigurh is at her house, posted up. And then she's like, oh, you really don't have to do this. And he's like, I made a promise to your husband. He's like, what are you talking about, dude? And he's like, oh, let's flip on it. Trying to save you one last time.
Call it.
No.
Call it.
No.
Call it.
No.
She loses. And so she kills her. Then after that, he walks out and he gets hit by a car. And there's some kids that see him, and he's like, you never saw me. He gives him $100, and he just walks off into the sunset. Afterwards, when Bell catches wind of both, not only Moss being dead, but his wife as well, he's like, yeah, man, I'm retiring. Fuck this. And so later at the end of the book, he has a conversation with his Uncle Willis about this secret that he's been keeping from everybody. Or in World War II, he left his platoon mates to die out in Germany, and he feels bad about that. And that's why the death of Carla Jean and Moss hit him so bad, because he let more people die under his watch, and that is a vow that he made to himself afterwards. So then he talks to his uncle about his dreams that he had about his father. One dream, his dad gave him a whole lot of money, but he loses it. In the second dream, his dad is riding in front of him on horseback, and his father has a torch out leading the way. You got that? Good. But what does it all mean? The title of the book is obviously relevant to what happens in this book. I mean, Ed Tom Bell essentially represents the old men that the country has left behind, that now the country is built for the new man, which is Anton Chigurh. I mean, we see time and time again, he is outwitted, outsurvived, outdone, out everything by Anton Chigurh, and to the point where he just folds and throws in the towel. That's pretty much it. But what about the movie? There's a reason why I used exclusively movie footage when talking about the story of this book, and that's because the movie itself stays so faithful to the book, while taking its own creative liberties, of course. It puts the movie so succinctly in a way that, you don't really see in a lot of book adaptations, and you can tell that the Coen brothers were really fans of this book to begin with, and Cormac McCarthy's other works. These wide, expansive shots that we have in this movie, combined with the dry color palette that accompanies it, just sets the scene and sets the visualization for what Cormac McCarthy really had in mind when he was writing this book. I mean, it's really impressive. Another outstanding creative choice is the soundtrack, or lack thereof. The movie really uses the diegetic sounds and the pacing of the dialogue and the strange sounds that the weapons make in this movie as its own soundtrack. The tension that is created with just no sound and just visualization, the diegetic sounds and the dialogue are just outstanding. It really could not be done like any better. Another good thing about this movie is how neatly it packages his book into just 2 hours, which is good to some extent, but it has its issues. For instance, the mention of Tom Bell being a World War II veteran is just completely gone for some reason, in a way that was really jarring to me when I first re-watched the movie. It's not even brought up when he's talking to his Uncle Ellis, and that, I think, is a huge major part of his philosophy, and it adds more punch as to why he felt so bad for Carla Jean and Llewellyn Moss dying. It's because that same thing happened to him, and he vowed to never let that happen again. But in the movie, it's not brought up. This is really disappointing, because when you take that part of him away, there's a lot of complexity that gets lost on the viewer that the reader would pick up on. And the monologues from Ed Tom Bell at the beginning of each chapter are gone, which, and you can't really adapt into a feature-length film without it being 5 hours long. And that's just a testament to how good books can just do shit better than movies, honestly. But overall, good movie, good book. I'm so tired.